Yo, what's up, you weirdos? What's going on, guys? What's going on out there? A lot of red in the market. I DCA'd 3 times so far today. 3 times. Can't stop, won't stop, baby. All right, so guys, listen. There was a hearing today in Congress, and it was Choke Point 2.0 exposed, right? Now, I watched some highlights from this earlier, and let me tell you, it's pretty steamy. It's pretty good, right? Elizabeth Warren gets exposed. It's a lot of fun. So we're going to watch that. I'm going to stream that here. But first, I'm going to jump into the comments a little bit, and we'll kind of go from there. So, William, what's up, my guy? Good to see you. Good to see you. Alex, what's up, man? Question between JASMY Swift and Onyx Coin. What's better investment, or what might go up first? I would think that XCN is probably going to go up first if they get the Binance listing. Green Tea in the house. What's going on? House, what's up, man? Big question. I looked at 5 different cryptos. Toshi, HBAR, XCN, JASMY, and Moonwell. All 5 of them sometimes jump up. Noticed this several times. Seems way too coincidental. If do you have a what? If you have a reason, please let me know. I didn't check them out, man, so I don't know, brother. Hey guys, what's going on, Nicholas? Good to see you, man. How's the group tonight? We're chilling. Hey everyone, smash the like button. Absolutely. Hit the like, hit the subscribe button, guys. Helps the channel grow. Costs you absolutely nothing. And it would be fantastic if you do that for me. It would be fantastic. Hippity hop. Rob only checked my portfolio twice today and didn't bother me one bit. Thanks to you, bud. All part of the plan. There you go. Exactly, man. Exactly. Ain't no thing but a chicken wing. I finally got on here on time. all the buying is making me exhausted. Nice. So Flo Rick in the house. What's up, buddy? Mr. Robimus, why don't you stake your XN? Because Coinbase wallet is asking me for my bank statements, and I'm not willing to provide them. So bought more Swift coin. There you go, Mike. There you go. Yo, what's up, Rob and Crypto Fam? Shane, what's going on, my guy? What's going on? Gain. I see many are giving up on crypto. Can't take it. Makes me bullish. Exactly. The more people give up, the more bullish I am. Top 5, Swift's not looking good. Looks fantastic to me, man. Looks like a buying opportunity. As my net worth is now 50 cents. I'll quote the rapper's first album, Get Rich or Die Trying. Yep. Swift has a decent drop. Yeah, good time to DCA. Dreadnought, what's up, man? Everyone acting negative should be buying up the dip. Yeah, exactly. Same people that are complaining are the same people that will be asking me later if I think there'll be another dip, right? So that they can buy. Is Swift based? Yes, it is. Rob, you are sure not related to George. You're always in a good mood. I am Rob. We're all Rob. I made it on time. There you go, Austin. Eating cereal and watching the crypto future. My guy, Otaku in the house. How's my JASMY gang? Smoke some green, sit back, check out your wallet in 2 months. There you go. That's right, Chase. 100%. All right, guys, so let's get into this here. Now, listen, there was a hearing today, like I talked about, and it was Operation Choke Point 2.0 exposed, right? It's actually titled The Biden Administration's Efforts to Put Crypto in the Crosshairs. So we're going to watch it because it's fun, okay? All right, so let me bring it up over here. All right, so let's see this here. Unfortunately, I can't bring it to full screen. It won't let me. So, yeah. All right, we're going to have this on, guys. So fast forward to when it starts. Here we go.
Authorized to declare a recess of the committee at any time. This hearing is entitled Operation Choke Point 2.0, Biden administration's efforts to put crypto in the crosshairs. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit extraneous materials to the chair for inclusion in the record. As a point of personal privilege, I want to say this is our first hearing of oversight and investigations for the Financial Service Committee for the 119th Congress. So I appreciate very much everyone being here, and we look forward to a very productive and civil and worthwhile time together. I'm pleased that we have our full committee chairman, Chairman Hill, with us. And now, on another point of personal privilege, I would like to yield to our ranking member, Representative Al Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm honored to congratulate you on your new position, your new station in life. I do look forward to working with you, and I welcome all of the members to the committee and would indicate that I appreciate your kindness and generosity in agreeing to allow me to have next to the last opportunity to speak at committee hearings. And again, I'm grateful.
Very good. Thank you. I now recognize myself for 4 minutes to give an opening statement. Today's hearing is entitled Operation Choke Point 2.0, the Biden administration's effort to put crypto in the crosshairs. I'd like to thank the witnesses very much for appearing before the committee today to share their experience, their great experience and expertise on this issue. Biden administration's Operation Choke Point 2.0 was carried out by the prudential regulators to target and, in fact, debank the digital asset ecosystem. The FDIC used offline conversations and threats of formal supervisory actions to pressure banks to deny service to digital asset firms, their employees, and even their customers. This is a serious abuse of regulatory power. Unfortunately, you would be wrong to assume this is the first attempt to debank an entire industry. Beginning in 2013, Obama's Department of Justice enlisted bank regulators in the first iteration of Operation Choke Point. President Obama's Operation Choke Point targeted gun manufacturers, payday loan companies, our energy industry, and other businesses and legal industries that were disfavored by the Obama administration. Their plan was straightforward: use the prudential regulators' authority to threaten supervisory action against banks who chose to provide services to these industries. After that, the bank has an ultimatum: continue to bank these customers under the looming threat of scrutiny, or comply with the regulators' demands and remove that line of business from their books. The Biden administration broke out the same playbook. This time, their target was the digital asset ecosystem. Biden regulators resorted to vague, interpretive regulatory letters threatening banks with negative examination scores and fines if they continue their partnership with digital asset companies. This is a serious overreach, one that not only undermines innovation, but directly harms consumers by restricting their access to new and beneficial financial products. Acting FDIC Chairman Travis Hill just yesterday exposed Biden's choke point activities that debank crypto firms across the country. He said requests from banks were almost universally met with resistance, both individually and collectively. These and other actions sent the message to banks that would be extraordinarily difficult, if not impossible, to move forward. As a result, the vast majority of banks simply stopped trying to do business with crypto companies. However, the FDIC promised to correct course moving forward, and I will continue to conduct oversight on their progress. We will continue to conduct oversight on their progress and determine legislative solutions, very much solutions to emphasize, to make sure this does not happen again. Access to capital and banking services are critical to the success of American businesses, and that's why I am looking forward to hearing from our witnesses today about how the regulators have been carrying this out and to discuss solutions to make sure it stops. The free market thrives when innovation is allowed to flourish. Regulators have a duty to protect our financial system, but not at the expense of legitimate businesses like energy and crypto companies. I yield back. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green, for 4 minutes for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the title of this hearing is Operation Choke Point 2.0, the Biden administration's efforts to put crypto in the crosshairs. However, A better title for this hearing is How President Trump's Self-Dealing Deregulation Will Put Well-Intentioned Investors at Risk. The name Operation 2.0 refers to a fake program never initiated by the Biden administration to restrict the cryptocurrency industry's access to the banking system. The Biden administration did not prohibit banks from dealing with cryptocurrency companies.
He's going to regret.
In January of 2023, federal financial regulators issued a joint statement warning banks about cryptocurrency asset risk, including but not limited to the risk of fraud and scams among crypto asset firms, the risk of inaccurate or misleading representations and disclosures by crypto asset companies, and many other risks. In March 2023, Silvergate Bank and Signature Bank, two key firms in the cryptocurrency banking industry, failed in part due to their involvement with the digital asset sector. For example, between 2014 and 2021, the share of Silvergate's crypto firm deposits increased from 1% of total deposits to a high of more than 98%. The failure of these banks demonstrated that the concerns financial regulators had regarding bank exposure to cryptocurrency risk were well-founded. Regulators asking banks to consider the risk associated with the cryptocurrency industry does not amount to debanking, as my Republican friends are indicating. Regulators simply urged banks to exercise caution when dealing with this emerging and potentially risky industry.
Proof came out
Unfortunately,
today, guys.
this hearing aids the Trump deregulatory pro-crypto agenda, as just days before President Trump's inauguration, he issued what I call a money Trump meme coin that was heavily promoted on social media. Investors who may see this coin as a way to get rich quick may be overpaying for something of dubious value and could be left holding the bag after a sell-off. Notably, the money Trump coins, terms and conditions restrict buyers from bringing class action lawsuits, even if they are swindled. Beyond the lack of investor protections and transparency, issuance of the money Trump coin also creates an avenue to circumvent national security and anti-corruption laws, allowing any interested party, including adversaries and allies, to anonymously transfer money to the president and his family. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman yields. The chair now recognizes the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Hill, for 1 minute.
I thank the chairman. Congratulations, Chairman Muser, for your first hearing on this important topic. I want to thank our witnesses for being with us today and sharing your views. Access to banking services is critical to build a successful business and to grow our thriving economy. Consider what happens when a bank refuses to provide services to your company at the direction of a bank regulator. That's exactly what was happening under the Biden-Harris's policy of Operation Choke Point 2.0, which nearly severed the digital asset ecosystem from financial institutions. Our regulators' highest priority should be promoting safety and soundness, true, at all of our financial institutions, but not picking winners and losers. We saw this not only in our bank supervision, but also at the SEC, where one of our witnesses today, Coinbase, an American company registered as a public company with the SEC, was treated poorly, and FTX, a criminal organization, wasn't even investigated. Yield back.
Gentleman yields. We will now go to our witnesses, and I will have the honor of introducing each. First, we have our first witness is Mr. Austin Campbell Mr. Campbell is the acting CEO of WSPN USA, managing partner and founder of Zero Knowledge Consulting, and an adjunct professor at New York University's Stern School of Business. Previously, Austin has held multiple roles in the financial world, including running trading desks at JP Morgan and Citi for over a decade, running the stablecoin platform at Paxos, and being a portfolio manager and structurer at Stone Ridge and NYDIG. Welcome. Our next witness is Mr. Paul Graywall. Paul Graywall is the Chief Legal Officer of Coinbase Global, Inc., where he is responsible for Coinbase's legal, compliance, global intelligence, and government relations groups. Before joining Coinbase, Paul was Vice President and Deputy General Counsel at Facebook and served as United States Magistrate Judge for the United States District Court for the Northern District of California. Thank you very much for being here. Next is Mr. Fred Thiel, the Chairman of the Board of Directors and Chief Executive Officer of Mara. He has over 35 years of extensive experience in the technology sector. He's an acclaimed innovator and expert, having led organizations across diverse fields, including digital assets, AI, semiconductors, and enterprise software. Appreciate you being here. Our last witness is Ms. Shana Oleshik. She is the Director of Banking Policy at Better Markets. She previously was the Deputy Director of the Division of Insurance and Research at the FDIC and has more than 25 years of public sector and nonprofit experience in banking, finance, and economics. Again, we thank you all for taking your time to be here. Each of you will be recognized for 5 minutes to give an oral opening presentation of your testimony. Without objection, your written statements will be made part of the record. Mr. Campbell, you are now recognized for 5 minutes for your remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Muser, and thank you to the entire committee for the opportunity to testify today and all the staffers working behind them to make this happen.
Mr. Campbell,
Yes.
is your mic on?
My mic appears to be on. Is this better?
That's better. Thank
All
you.
right, excellent. So thank you, Chairman Muser. Appreciate the opportunity to testify today and all of the members and staff working on this hearing. So today we're here to talk about Operation Choke Point 2.0, which everybody will note means there was an Operation Choke Point 1.0 prior to this that Congress also had to address. Before we get to the specifics of the crypto industry, I would say this indicates we have a governance issue with banking regulation writ large. The fact that supervision is often confidential, hidden, and nobody knows exactly what happened itself is a problem that leads to abuse. And I would suggest to the committee that without addressing this, there will be hearings on Operation Choke Point 3.0 and 4.0 and 5.0 onward to infinity. So what happened with 2.0? It was an attempt to debank the crypto industry in America. And by debank, I want to be specific and say, I mean the denial of banking services that are considered basic and fundamental to operating a business. This is not, you don't get approved for a mortgage. This is not, you don't get a loan on favorable terms. This is, I can't get a checking account to make payroll, to pay rent, to pay utilities, to pay taxes. And it is that specific area where there were severe problems for crypto companies from 2022 to present within the US financial system. So there was a document drop from the FDIC yesterday that highlights some of these problems, but within it, you will see specific mentions of crypto companies being denied accounts because regulators wouldn't approve new banking activity. You will see specific clients being limited or eliminated by banks because regulators told them they were not allowed to bank them. And you will see a concerted campaign to characterize all forms of activity touching the crypto space as illicit or extremely incompatible with safety and soundness guidelines. Now, how does this work? The FDIC has a rubric called CAMELS, and I'm sorry, it doesn't refer to the animal. That is an acronym that they use to actually think about bank risk, and it covers things like capital, assets, liquidity, objective and verifiable concerns. The dangerous one is the letter in the middle, the hump in CAMELS, the M, and that is management. And management serves as a subjective measure of a banking regulator's belief of the competence or behavior of the management of a bank. And importantly, whatever your CAMELS rating is the ceiling on your total rating as a bank. So if I have a bank that does nothing but take money for checking accounts and buys T-bills, which would be the safest bank in the entire ecosystem in the United States of America, but a banking regulator decides for subjective reasons that management is poor and downgrades them, that bank could be put out of business purely on the subjective judgment of a regulator in private, as all of that will remain confidential. This is a vehicle for abuse. And it's also an area where the safety and soundness concerns, which on a standalone basis are legitimate, become warped. And they can be used as a tool to discriminate against industries, against individuals on any basis people want, because it's not discoverable. So in my written testimony, I go into this in greater detail, but I believe there are important reforms this committee should consider with regard to how this behavior happens in the banking space. A simple one is that all banking guidance should be written. Do not allow verbal guidance. Do not allow hearsay and subjective statements. Write it down. Secondly, that guidance should be made public on some trailing basis. Once you have a paper trail of what the regulators are doing, we will be having many less of these hearings. We will know exactly what has happened. When banks refuse people services, they should have to tell them why. And those statements should be written, complete, and transparent. Lastly, they should abolish management and reputational risk as components of the rating of banks. Those are subjective, rife for abuse, and can be used for really any ends that a banking regulator would like to wedge into an otherwise relatively objective framework. Finally, I'm a professor. I wouldn't let any of my students grade their own homework. You should not be letting the banking regulators grade their own work here either. Agency decisions should be subject to outside oversight. Don't let a banking regulator like the FDIC be judge, jury, and executioner in private. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman Muser, Ranking Member Green, and distinguished members and staff of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Paul Graywall, and I serve as the Chief Legal Officer at Coinbase, the largest publicly traded crypto company in the United States. Today, I want to shed light on the systematic effort to debank the American crypto industry, and then to deny it the legal protections afforded by Congress and the courts. While crypto is the current target, any legal American industry could be next if regulators continue to use banking services as a political weapon. My focus today is on the actions of the FDIC. In March 2022, the FDIC began sending letters to senior bank officials urging them to stop all crypto-related activity with no clear timeline for review or for sharing any analysis of explicit risks. The letters continued well into 2023. In October 2023, the FDIC's own Inspector General issued a report making clear the FDIC was actively limiting financial innovation with little regard to actual risk to the financial system. That IG report recommended the FDIC establish a plan with timeframes for assessing crypto-related risk and clarify the supervisory feedback process regarding crypto activities. The FDIC agreed to implement these recommendations by January 2024. But more than a year later, the FDIC did not implement anything and still has not implemented anything that adequately addresses these problems. We agree regulators should assess financial risks, but they should not use political bias to stifle a legal industry behind closed doors. As a result, Coinbase and a partner filed multiple FOIA requests to the FDIC to uncover the extent of their actions. After the FDIC stonewalled us at every turn, we sued in federal district court in order to obtain the information. The court ordered the FDIC to release redacted versions of their pause letters. The FDIC's initial production, however, was threadbare. But just yesterday, as Mr. Campbell indicated, and at the direction of FDIC Acting Chairman Hill, the FDIC finally released a more complete set of 175 documents, totaling over 700 pages that reveal an even more disturbing pattern and practice to debank our sector than previously known. Over and over again, the FDIC bludgeoned the banks with an onslaught of examinations and questions until the banks relented under the pressure. For example, the documents show that regulators forced banks to deny stablecoin issuers bank accounts for their reserves. That meant stablecoin issuers had fewer places to turn for banking services, causing increased concentration risk and fewer opportunities for community banks and others to grow deposits. In this very room, policymakers have raised concerns that crypto could pose a risk to the traditional financial system. But because of the FDIC's actions, here the opposite happened. The traditional financial system posed a risk to crypto and, critically, its customers. During the same period in which the FDIC was telling banks to halt activity, the FDIC was also publicly denying they were discouraging banks from offering services to lawful businesses, including crypto. For example, in a January 2023 joint statement, the FDIC, along with other banking regulators, explicitly stated that banking organizations are neither prohibited nor discouraged from providing banking services to customers of any specific class or type, as permitted by law or regulation. Regardless of one's views on crypto, everyone should be alarmed that regulators were saying one thing publicly while instructing banks to do something very different behind closed doors. Coinbase's FOIA litigation has exposed this lack of transparency, regulatory bias, and abuse of power. Bringing these issues into public view has significant implications, not just for crypto, but for broader regulatory fairness. I remain optimistic about crypto's future in America, despite the abuse I've outlined today. We can start by enabling banks to provide crypto. To that end, Coinbase sent a letter to the banking regulators earlier this week, urging them to take specific actions like withdrawing OCC Interpretive Letter 1179 and enabling innovative technology solutions. In addition to opening up banking services to the crypto industry, I would urge Congress to pass legislation that creates regulatory certainty for crypto. I applaud the work of Chairman Hill and other members of this committee for their work on FIT 21 and stablecoin legislation, and we are eager to engage on similar legislation this year. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Mr. Teal, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Muser, Ranking Member Green, and distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify on the critical issue of debanking of the digital asset ecosystem. I'm honored today to be here to discuss the events that took place under Operation Choke Point 2.0 and the effects it had on the digital asset industry at large. My name is Fred Teal, and I serve as CEO of Mara, a leading company in the digital asset industry and the largest publicly traded Bitcoin miner. Mara is also the second largest corporate holder of Bitcoin. I'm proud to say that Mara is dedicated to fostering U.S. economic growth, advancing domestic energy innovation, and bolstering U.S. national security through blockchain technology. From revitalizing renewable energy assets and strengthening our power grids, to mitigating methane emissions on oil fields and driving efficiency gains in high-performance computing applications like AI, Mara is fueling progress at the intersection of technology and industry. The employees that put on the Mara hat and go to work every day are a team comprised of veterans, blue-collar workers, and technology and finance experts who contribute significantly to our local and national economies. Mara invested nearly $2 billion into the U.S. economy in 2024, including $215 million investment in Nebraska, $229 million investment in Ohio, and over $1 billion investment in the state of Texas. As CEO of Mara, I've had the privilege of being at the forefront of the digital asset industry's evolution over the last 5 years, witnessing firsthand its growth and impact on the future of finance. The United States is no stranger to the disruption and change that accompanies innovation. Our nation has not only witnessed but led the development of transformative technologies like the internet, personal computers, and now artificial intelligence. Blockchain technology and digital assets represent yet another frontier of auspicious change that is already revolutionizing our daily lives. Yet despite the positive impact and promise of this technology, it is undeniable that the digital asset industry has been treated differently, singled out and subjected to unprecedented actions that threaten to stifle America's leadership and innovation. Such discriminatory practices contradict our nation's ethos of technological advancement and pose significant risks to our economic competitiveness and national security. Today, I'm here to shed light on how these opaque behind-the-scenes financial exclusion practices often occur without public scrutiny or legislative oversight, and if left unchecked, jeopardize the ability of legitimate businesses to operate within the United States, driving capital offshore. Clear, fair regulation must ensure that all companies that follow the law and play by the rules are treated fairly and have equal access to basic financial services. It's crucial that we address these challenges to ensure America maintains its competitive edge in this rapidly evolving sector. In 2023 and 2024, companies in the digital asset sector have experienced a disturbing pattern of financial exclusion by major banks, payment processors, and financial service providers. These actions taken without clear justification include the closure of commercial banking services, denial of lending and credit facilities, and exclusion from payment platforms. Discriminatory banking and financial policies harm the digital asset ecosystem and broader economic interests. By restricting access to essential services, banks and payment processors are determining which industries can thrive in the U.S. These restrictions also undermine energy and national security goals, as digital asset mining and blockchain technology are key to optimizing energy grids and bolstering security. Financial barriers slow investment in these critical solutions. Additionally, these practices violate free market principles, allowing financial institutions to arbitrarily exclude legitimate industries, stifling competition, and setting a dangerous precedent for financial censorship. To address these systematic abuses, I urge Congress to take several actions. First, ensure equal access to financial services by prohibiting blanket bans on digital asset companies, requiring individual risk assessments instead. Second, increase regulatory transparency by mandating that financial institutions disclose reasons for account closures or denials, ensuring due process. Third, promote a competitive financial ecosystem through clear regulations that allow digital asset businesses to operate without fear of arbitrary exclusion. Finally, protect innovation by recognizing blockchain's role in energy infrastructure and aligning financial policies with national security goals. Some financial institutions have become increasingly welcome of cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, recognizing the growing and strategic importance of digital assets. Some have established dedicated teams and divisions devoted to integrating this technology, expanding access to cryptocurrencies, and investing in its future. I want to thank those who have partnered with our industry and have vocally advocated for clear frameworks that will provide necessary certainty to allow America to continue to innovate and lead the world on digital assets. In conclusion, the financial debanking of digital asset ecosystems represents an existential threat to American leadership in technology, economic competitiveness, and national security. Without immediate action, legitimate businesses will continue to face discrimination, forcing innovation offshore and reducing U.S. influence in a critical sector. I appreciate the committee's attention to this matter and look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Teal. Ms. Oleszek, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Hill, Chairman Muser, Ranking Member Waters, and Ranking Member Green, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the invitation to testify today. My name is Shayna Oleszek, and I'm the Director of Banking Policy at Better Markets. Better Markets is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, independent organization founded in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis to promote the public interest in the financial markets, support financial reforms of Wall Street, and make the financial system work for all Americans again. I have more than 25 years of experience in the financial services and banking regulatory area. I have led and participated in projects related to banking regulatory policy, systemic risk, the provision of banking services and products to all Americans, including underserved consumers and communities. The topic of today's hearing is of vital importance: whether or not regulators will conduct unbiased, risk-based analysis, regardless of the source of risk to the banking system. What's really at stake is protecting our financial system and Main Street Americans from the risks, costs, and consequences of incredibly volatile and often flagrantly illegal conduct and criminal activity. Many crypto companies have put themselves in the crosshairs by choosing to engage in or enable these activities. If the crypto industry had followed the law like almost every other financial firm in the US, then it would not be crosswise with the regulators, who are mandated to enforce the law and protect consumers, investors, and financial stability. This is also an issue of fairness to the other financial firms in the US who are following the law. Crypto should not be given an unfair advantage over its competitors with a different set of rules. The explosive growth of crypto in recent years has massively endangered the financial system in ways we have never seen. Banks and other financial firms have become involved with crypto firms, and several have experienced devastating failures. These failures harmed the banking system and bank customers and came with an enormous price tag of $40 billion in direct costs, that's billion with a B, and threatened financial stability. Furthermore, Main Street Americans are being misled and defrauded into believing that crypto is insured by the FDIC, which is a completely false claim. Financial experts, regulators, and law enforcement all recognize the very real risk that crypto presents to the banking industry and financial stability. For instance, the FBI received more than 69,000 reports of financial fraud involving crypto in the year 2023 alone, with estimated losses to real people of $5.6 billion. Even hedge fund titan Elliott Management has sounded an unprecedented alarm about the speculative frenzy in the crypto markets. None of this is to dispute that access to the banking services is an important goal to support the functioning of our economy and benefit all Americans. Regulators have two fundamental duties in this area. First, regulators have a duty to ensure that banks comply with applicable laws. Second, regulators must promote safe and sound banking practices and must take corrective action when banks engage in unsafe and unsound practices. The bottom line here is that regulators and banks must act in the best interest of the public and Main Street Americans. The facts and evidence show that standing with crypto often means standing with those who engage in high risk, if not illegal and criminal activities, with a highly volatile product that has no legitimate social use and could endanger the entire financial system and ultimately the economy. These are very real risks. Having so recently suffered from the catastrophic 2008 financial crash, enabled and fueled by unregulated, novel, and innovative financial products, the American people deserve that protection. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Now I'd like to explain how Ranking Member Green and I have agreed to establish the question order. We'll follow the rules of the committee, alternating between one Republican and one Democrat member for 5 minutes each, with the exception that Mr. Green will be the last Democrat member to speak or to ask questions immediately before the last Republican member. We'll now turn to member questions. The chair, myself, I will recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Campbell, so you witnessed firsthand how Operation Choke Point was orchestrated in the past. Can you give us some details, walk us through the specific directives or tactics regulators used back then, which pressured banks into severing ties with legally operating businesses, and how those tactics are sadly been recognized in the more recent past related to crypto?
Yes, sir, of course. So I would say when you're in a risk officer position at a bank, as I've been in the past, and you're communicating with regulators, you are getting fundamentally several layers of guidance from them. One is whatever the written findings are that they eventually come to at the conclusion of an examination or something of that sort. But through the course of that and prior to the written findings is a lot of verbal guidance. So when you were attempting to engage in certain types of crypto activities, the kinds of statements you would get, which you will see banking regulators making to this day in public. In fact, Jerome Powell, chairman of the Federal Reserve, said similar things recently, is while you are not legally prohibited from doing these things, we find them to be extremely risky. And there's no particularized analysis of why they are risky, right? If you were to say, well, you've told me giving a deposit account to a crypto company is risky because maybe these deposits will flee quickly. And you say something like, okay, I hear you. I will segment those deposits and back them only with T-bills, the safest, most liquid asset known to man in the world, essentially unlevered, no long-dated lending. And they say, well, we have reputational concerns about you banking crypto clients. We're still not sure. Maybe we'll answer you on that. Maybe we don't, but we still find it risky. You understand that to mean no, right? I'm a parent. I have 2 kids. They understand when they ask me if they want to do something or not. And I say, well, you can do what you want, but I wouldn't if I were you. But they know that really means no. One thing they do is this. The other thing they do, which, you know, Paul, you had referenced this earlier, that the pause letters and sort that recently came out from the FDIC indicate, is they will just ask you questions endlessly and tell you that you need to get permission from the regulator to engage in these activities. And hopefully they'll never stop asking questions, right? This could be 2 years straight of questions with no end point, no finish line, no clear articulation as to what they're trying to learn. And at some point, it just becomes a repetitive cycle. And it's clear the answer is no. The final point is, as I said, with the regulatory guidance, they will start punishing you in other ways. They will look at your business and start tweaking your CAMELS ratings. They will start raising the operational risk of your bank. They will start downgrading your management judgment because you have persisted in offering these sorts of concerns. They will even go so far in many cases as to pressure banks providing you services, if you are a small bank, to stop doing so. So for instance, there have been cases of smaller banks having their correspondent banking relationships terminated so they can no longer send international wires or things of that sort, where regulators went and pressured other people serving them.
And all this is quite damaging. along
Those
the
are
way.
extremely damaging. And I would tell you, these efforts make it uneconomic to serve the crypto industry. So while there's no legal ban, there is a functional ban for a for-profit institute approaching this space. when they
Thank
do it
you.
this way. Thank you.
Mr. Graywell, thank you. The significance of these pause letters, can you kind of summarize that for us?
What the pause letters show, Chairman Muser, is that over and over again, banks were subject not to regulation by examination, but regulation by exhaustion. You had question after question raised. If even a hint of interest was shared that the bank wanted to enter into a basic service for its customers involving crypto or to facilitate basic crypto transactions. What makes the pause letters particularly troubling is that all of this activity, all of this exhaustion and re-examination took place against a backdrop of the FDIC telling the public something very different. And this comes in the form of the response to the Inspector General report that I referenced in my opening statement. It was in that response that the FDIC suggested that banks had every right to participate in crypto activity. We know that was false. And we know that they had no intention of ever permitting that activity to take place. It's that practice of saying one thing in public and doing something very different in private that I think is particularly concerning, and something that this committee ought to pay attention to.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Teal, in spite of the actions taken by the FDIC, which were egregious and somewhat astonishing, the damage caused, are there solutions? And are those solutions quite attainable? My time has expired, so I'd like to hear that answer throughout the course of this testimony. Thank you. I now yield to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Waters, ranking member of the full committee, for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. While I would like to really engage on this question of debanking, having worked on stable coins and understand what is going on, both with the big banks of America and with crypto, let me just say the big banks are not interested in opening up bank to the small people, to poor people, and they have debanked large segments of the communities of America already. With crypto, they're divided. Crypto talks about some of them, they want regulations, others do not want regulations. So I'm not going to spend my time talking about them. This fight is going to go on for quite some time. We must, however, acknowledge the takeover of the federal payment system by an unelected billionaire donor that took place last week. Despite resistance from senior officials, co-President Musk seized access to Treasury payment systems, including the sensitive personal data of virtually every American. I've heard from hundreds of people who are worried about Elon Musk having access to their sensitive data, including the impact on Social Security payments, Medicare benefits. What are the implications of this illegal takeover for the American people? And while we have been confronted with chaos in the past few days, and we're trying to figure out what's going to happen to those employees, those federal government employees have been told that they're going to be furloughed. They don't know what's going to happen to them. I was absolutely shocked when the President of the United States said to all of the departments that supposedly have people that are working in diversity, equity, and inclusion out by 5 o'clock. It sounded to me like some of those times that we witnessed in the past with communities that told people to be out by sundown, et cetera, et cetera. And so we can talk about what is going on with debanking all that we want, but America is in trouble, deep trouble. And it's not simply about what is happening here with the leadership of this government in America. They're all over the country. I just discovered that Elon Musk is threatening the president of South Africa. We worked very hard dealing with South Africa and getting rid of the kind of racism that was involved historically. And now they're being threatened because Elon Musk is going to open up a battery factory in South Africa. He wants them to get rid of the 30% participation that was fought for so that Black South Africans could participate. And so Trump is saying to the South African government, if you don't get rid of your diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're going to cut off all of the support through the USAID. USAID has been shut down, and it was shut down by the co-president, Elon Musk. And guess why? He's under investigation by the USAID. And so while we talk about debanking, that's an issue. And I'm going to tell you, the banks and crypto are going to fight it out. And I guess the biggest billionaires will win because that's what it seems to be all about in this country these days. And that is about billionaires and their power. So go on and talk about it. But I'm going to fight for the opportunity for the average person in this country, for the little people, to have some kind of banking services. We've been screaming about payday loans. We've been screaming about a lack of access for people in poor communities. That's not a big issue anymore. It's about whether the big banks and crypto are going to find a way to get along. So you all carry on with this today, but I want you to know I'm going to continue to pay attention to what the co-president is doing, what this president is doing, and the kind of rally that was seen over at the Treasury Department just a day ago, where everybody came together, thousands of people, to say, hands off our private information, hands off Social Security, hands off what is happening with the tax revenue in this country. With that, I know you're glad I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields. Without objection, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record the statement by the Department of Treasury about what is actually happening within the payment system and the level of security that has been assured by the Secretary of the Treasury. Without objection. We now recognize the gentlewoman from Missouri, Mrs. Wagner, who is also the chair of the subcommittee on capital markets, and now recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on your new gavel. And I am going to try and turn us back to the topic of the day. And I thank our witnesses for sharing the difficulties their firms have had accessing routine banking services simply because of their involvement in the digital asset ecosystem. It is clear that under the previous administration, the Biden administration, digital asset firms were the victims of a pressure campaign initiated by regulators designed to cut them off from our economy. Regulators should not be picking winners and losers based on what industries enjoy the political favor of the sitting president. Individuals operating fully legal businesses deserve the right to seek access to banking, and banks must be free to make decisions about the customers they serve without regulators pressuring them to toe the hostile administration's line. Mr. Teal, has your bank ever stated whether their prudential regulators told them that they should refrain from providing services to digital asset firms?
Representative Wagner, we banked with Signature, and when the FDIC shut them down and Flagstar took over the accounts, none of the crypto accounts were allowed to be part of those assets acquired, and we were forced to immediately seek accounts with other banks. We were able to open an account with another bank, deposited $70 million after going through all the approval processes, and 6 days later, we're told we have to shut down the accounts because our bank no longer will bank crypto companies.
So the answer is yes.
Yes.
And what did they say?
We were basically given a policy decision by the bank that they would no longer service crypto companies, period. And we were asked to withdraw our money, and I think it was 24 hours or 72 hours.
No explanation, just by fiat.
Yes.
Wow. Mr. Campbell, do you believe the treatment by the prudential regulators related to digital assets differs from the treatment of other lines of business, transactions, and portfolios?
I definitely do. There was actually a study recently by the AIMA and John DiAgostino that I reference in my written testimony, where they went and systematically surveyed asset management firms, those who are traditional asset managers, so call it the Fidelities of the world and hedge funds and things of that sort, and then those that served crypto. Among the traditional asset managers, many of whom do engage in highly risky strategies, and I say this as somebody who's worked at a traditional asset manager myself, almost none of them had problems accessing banking services. But among the crypto segment, even those doing the most vanilla, most boring, long-only sort of strategies, roughly 2/3 had problems acquiring
2/3.
banking services.
Wow.
There was a large disparity.
And I'd like you to get me that study and we'll submit it for the record. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Do you believe that regulators are using debanking as a tool to advance their anti-digital asset agenda?
I do. And you see this in many of the FDIC pause letters where they just say crypto is bad. And you ask them, well, why do you think crypto is bad? And they say, because it's risky. And you ask them, well, why do you think it's risky? And they say, because it's bad, right? It is circular reasoning. And they never really give any fundamental justification for why it might be risky for, say, Mr. Teal's company to make payroll, right? Or pay their rent. And that is sort of what gives lie to me of the behavior, is the inability to provide even basically riskless banking services.
Okay, we've also seen overzealous regulation by enforcement, and that's what I call it, regulation by enforcement by the SEC. Mr. Gruhl, how has the regulation by enforcement approach hurt U.S. leadership in technology and financial innovation?
Congressman, respectfully, I think another way to ask that question maybe, how hasn't it hurt us to be sued by the SEC after years of asking, indeed begging for simple rules from the Securities and Exchange Commission
I know.
that could be followed and allow companies like ours to accept their invitation to come in and register?
Would you clarify a little bit more? Can you describe Coinbase's efforts to gain clarity from these regulators and
Yes.
financial institutions?
Yes, ma'am. We have formally requested rules by petition. That petition was denied by the SEC. That denial was found to be arbitrary, capricious, and the reasoning vacuous by U.S. Court of Appeals. We have attempted to meet with the SEC on dozens and dozens of occasions with our own ideas for how regulation might work and what standards might apply to the industry as a whole.
Now,
Over and over again, we were thwarted. We were told, thank you, and go away.
I thank you. I'm sorry. We're gonna get this straightened out. My time's expired, Mr. Chairman.
Gentlelady yields. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Michigan, Ms. Tlaib, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Oleshik, what would you say to a family member that, a friend that came up to you super excited to invest in crypto or digital assets? I think we all had that one cousin that called. I mean, what would you say to them before they invested?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. I think that Americans are skeptical of crypto, and rightly so. Americans have seen the illegal activity and arrests and just dangerous activity. Looking at a CNBC poll, only 8% of Americans have a positive view of crypto. And looking at the Federal Reserve data, only 7% of Americans own crypto and only 1% use it to buy things. So I would encourage them to have some caution and to encourage them to go to a
Yeah.
traditional bank where
Well, I
they'll be
raised the question
protected.
because there are Detroit residents who have lost thousands of dollars in cryptocurrency in my district. And I actually have one of my Livonia residents right outside of the city recently contacted our office where she had lost $400,000 through a cryptocurrency scam. And it was just heartbreaking. And I just feel like we cannot ignore that. Today's hearing, of course, is supposed to be about debanking faced by crypto industry. But if we really were concerned about financial inclusion, we know that many of the most vulnerable among us, Black, Brown, low income, lack access to basic financial services. And I know across the country, we have charities, individuals, and businesses have experienced trouble opening a bank, maintaining their account, sending or receiving payments because of religious or ethnic national affiliations. And I say this because as one of the only few Muslim Americans serving in Congress, I was surprised to see that one of these polls found that more than 1 out of 4 Muslim Americans reported challenges while banking. And someone said in my district once, it's called banking while Muslim, right? And Ms. O'Shelley, how can lawmakers be able to combat such discriminatory debanking practices?
So I think I would answer with 2 things. First, to strengthen oversight and increase accountability to ensure that banks are following the appropriate laws and regulations, that anti-discrimination laws that protect all Americans. And secondly, under the former CFPB chair, director, I think some good work was being done to explore alternative methodologies for people without credit to build credit.
Yeah, I think this is more because they're Muslim. So now I'd like to discuss facts motivating today's hearing and Coinbase's and its consultants' complaint against the FDIC. The claim they quote, probably familiar with this, starting in 2022, federal financial regulators have taken a concerted steps designed to cripple the digital asset industry. But what's interesting about this timeline, and maybe Ranking Member, you'd find this interesting, what actually happened around 2022? Folks are forgetting, I mean, they were going to play dumb, but we know what happened. Investors lost $2 trillion during what we call crypto winter, and a whole host of crypto and digital asset companies went belly up, including FTX and Celsius. In early 2023, we saw Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, and Silvergate failed, with crypto playing a huge role in it. So how would you characterize the crypto industry's access to banking services before crypto company and regional banking failures around 2022?
So I think that there was caution and the regulators recognizing the risk that these companies.
They messed up, right? It messed up. They failed. This $2 trillion.
True.
Yeah, but they act like, poof, we were just like picking on them.
True. So
We were picking on them. They messed up.
So the regulators, the banking regulators recognizing the risk that these companies presented, and then we saw what happened in 2023.
Well, really quick, I know according to the FDIC's Inspector General reported in early 2023 that 136 FDIC insured banks have ongoing or planned digital asset activities. So it sounds like crypto industry was doing okay in terms of access. Then the industry tanked. Banks got spooked. Regulators took a closer look. So would you agree with this rough timeline and description? Because I think it's important for the American people to understand this as we sit here. What happened before all of a sudden you guys all got the knock on the door? Something was happening. And so I think it's really important. So again, its regulators got tougher after multiple bankruptcies and related bank failures. That's a fact. And it's part of again, I think the facts that nobody's going to bring up. You fail, you're hurting American people. We're going to have oversight and we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. Thank you.
And Lydia Ilks, Mr. Loudermilk of Georgia is now recognized for 5 minutes for his questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank the panel for being here. It's a very important topic, and it's something that has to be addressed. And with the original choke point, federal regulators carried out a coordinated campaign of harassment against law-abiding businesses based on thinly defined reputational and regulatory risk. That resulted in the systemic debanking of thousands of American businesses, legal businesses, and I would argue constitutionally protected businesses, like gun dealers, pawn shops, and installment lenders. While the first Trump administration ended this abuse of regulatory power, the Biden administration regulators wasted no time in bringing it back with a new target: innovators and entrepreneurs. My first question, Mr. Campbell. To carry out their politically motivated campaign against American innovation, Biden regulators used something called supervisory non-objection letters. Could you briefly explain what these letters are and what they meant for banks?
Yes, of course. It basically requires a bank to go to a regulator and get non-objection, that is to say they don't tell you no, to be allowed to engage in any sort of banking activity.
So in your opinion, do these letters change the law as enacted by Congress?
I think when they are abused, there is that potential, yes. In fact, to the previous representative's point, we're somewhat twisted around here in that the regulators took the stance of because some actors in a space are bad, we will therefore debank all of the actors in a space, which you will notice is the exact sort of line of thinking that's been promulgated to justify the actions of the FDIC with regard to choke point, but also, was the rationale behind redlining and the denial of banking services to minorities in the past. So I would suggest it's a governance issue. Yes, sir.
All right, thank you for that. The Trump administration regulators, particularly the OCC, also used supervisory interpretive letters during his first term. What are the main differences between those interpretive letters and the supervisory non-objection letters issued under the Biden administration?
Well, interpretive letters are attempting to parse through the law and give people a path to either engage in actions or a rationale not to engage in those actions, hopefully well-founded. And when they're made public, I think they're very valuable because then everybody is playing by the same rule set. The non-objection letters were particularized, individual, and private. So exactly as Mr. Graywall said earlier, there's no way to know what each individual bank is being told, and it allows a regulator to say one thing publicly and do something else privately, or just as bad, favor some banks over others.
So I guess the title of the letters is definitive, interpretive versus non-objectionable. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And Mr. Grewal, did the Biden administration specifically issue these supervisory non-objection letters to target digital assets that were previously allowed by the Trump administration?
Yes.
If banks must ask regulators for explicit permission to bank crypto firms, how does this affect their willingness to bank those firms?
It discourages those banks from even trying in the first place, Congressman. And the reason is that having to submit those requests under a well-defined framework with a deadline is one thing, but to simply submit and await an answer whenever and according to whatever standard the regulator deems fit, that's something else entirely, and that's something that ultimately discourages banks from even participating in the first place.
So are you aware of any banks that went through the non-objection process? And if so, how did those banks fare?
I'm aware of many examples of banks who have went through that process as a result of the documents that we secured through our FOIA suit against the FDIC. And what we saw in the documents that were produced just yesterday is that in case after case, when the banks stepped forward and raised their hands and asked for permission to offer basic services, they were either ignored or they were given detailed examination and re-examination and re-examination until they simply gave up.
So there was a time, and I believe that the administrative state was established to work with industry to provide guidance, create some consumer protection. I remember when FDIC was viewed as a partner with banks, would help the banks to operate in a functional. This sounds to me like this is an adversarial relationship instead of a partnership. Would you agree with that?
I would. If there was an offer made, it was an offer that the banks were not allowed to refuse.
Well, thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The chair now recognizes the gentle lady from Georgia, Ms. Williams, for 5 minutes for her questions.
Thank you, Chairman Muser and Ranking Member Green. Now, colleagues, I'm going to need a little help from y'all in this first portion. Raise your hand if you've been overloaded this week with urgent calls from constituents worried about how President Biden treated crypto firms. Okay, I didn't get any calls about this week. No. So raise your hand if you've gotten urgent calls from your constituents about a non-elected billionaire and his overreach in the agencies that this committee oversees and harming those most marginalized. My phones have been ringing off the hook. Exactly what I thought. My colleagues are saying the same thing. Y'all, this is our first subcommittee hearing, and it's going to be about fake oversight over the crypto policy of former President Biden. He isn't even in power anymore. Are we really going to ignore all of our constituents who've reached out with their frustrations, confusion, and concerns about Elon Musk dismantling our federal government? Getting answers for our constituents is what this subcommittee should be doing. Now, look, I fully understand the importance of the crypto industry. The digital asset market is rapidly growing throughout my district, especially in my home city of Atlanta. So I get it, y'all. I want my people to thrive. The Financial Services Committee should have serious bipartisan conversations about crypto policy, but saying that President Biden's policies discriminated against crypto firms isn't a serious take. It's a distraction from the mess that my colleagues, my Republican colleagues, are creating here in DC. So I have a better idea. If my Republican colleagues want to talk about discrimination in the banking system, let's have a real conversation about that. And I'll start. Ms. Oleshik, the city of Atlanta has one of the largest racial wealth gaps in the country. Did that just emerge over the last 4 years because of President Biden's so-called discrimination against cryptocurrency?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. And no, the wealth gap has actually been growing for years and decades now and has actually gotten worse, not better.
Exactly. I didn't think so. So, Ms. Oleshik, let me try another theory. Did the racial wealth gap emerge in part because of the long legacy of discrimination against Black and Brown Americans in the banking system?
Yes, I believe that that has contributed. Black and Brown Americans do not feel comfortable going to traditional banks often. They feel discriminated against. So yes, I believe that that is a major.
Now we're getting somewhere. Many Black and Brown Americans have historically been turned away from the traditional banking system simply because of the color of their skin. Many Black entrepreneurs still have cash-only businesses. So, Ms. Oleshik, what can regulators do to address the real needs of unbanked individuals like so many throughout my district in Atlanta?
I think this is a key question, and I have a couple suggestions. First of all, there are what's called minority depository institutions, or MDIs. These are banks that are specifically focused on serving minority communities. And there have been many studies that show that Black and Brown people who go into a bank where they see people that they feel comfortable with, they often, loan approvals are better, and they have a better experience at a bank. So encouraging more of the MDIs to open. Unfortunately, they're on a downward trend now, so that's something that that we need to do, and also expand diversity in public and private leadership, both at banks and at the agencies, to ensure that the policies are serving everyone.
So while my Republican colleagues want to discuss getting bank accounts for cryptocurrency, I want fair policies. I want it across the board. But I wonder more about getting bank accounts for the people in my district who remain unbanked. I was once unbanked myself. Unfortunately, recent data shows that 11% of Black American households are still unbanked, compared to 2% of white households. So, Ms. Oleshik, will attacking and getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs throughout the government help close the racial wealth gap or widen this divide?
Oh, it will absolutely widen the divide. It's not going to help at all.
So thank you so much for this conversation today. I hope that we can continue to make sure that while we are not only looking out to make sure that cryptocurrency firms and everyone who is seeking to thrive in this industry have access to bank accounts, that we're also looking out for those people that we were sent here to serve, like the people in my district in Atlanta. It's clear that we have a lot of work to do in this Congress, but if we're going to do it, we have to talk about the real problems facing real people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields. The chair now recognizes Mr. Garbarino from New York for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the witnesses also for for being here today. One story that we've consistently heard from opponents of digital assets is how it provides for significant source of financing for terrorist groups and other illicit activities. However, the evidence tells us a different story. According to a recent report, illicit activity is down, with analysts estimating that crypto transaction volume associated with illicit activity is only at 0.34%. Mr. Graywall, how do companies like Coinbase approach know your customer and anti-money laundering requirements with financial institutions?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. Coinbase is licensed in 45 states as a money transmitter, and also the New York BIT license also applies to our firm. We are a registered money services business with FinCEN under the Department of Treasury. We also have broker-dealer licenses all over the federal government as well at the SEC, and we are also licensed at the CFTC.
So
With
you're
respect to your question,
yeah.
we take our obligations to follow the Bank Secrecy Act and all KYC and AML rules extremely seriously. We have hundreds of employees and thousands of contractors who work on these issues each and every day. To the extent you or any other member have questions about the strength of our commitment to law enforcement and enforcement of the BSA, I encourage you to speak with the men and women of law enforcement, the FBI, the DEA, and across this country in state and local departments. I think they will tell you that their best days are when they are investigating crime that involves cryptocurrency as opposed to cash or other forms of payment that are far more prevalent in this country. They prefer to work with Coinbase.
Thank you very much. Mr. Teal, prior to being debanked, had you provided all necessary information to your bank in order for them to be compliant with KYC and AML standards?
Yes, sir.
Had your previous banking partner raised any KYC or AML concerns with you during that relationship?
None, sir.
So since being debanked, do the institutions you attempt to receive service from cite KYC or AML risks associated with your company?
No, sir. Congressman, they essentially just say they have a policy against crypto. And in some cases, the KYC process can take years, and then they simply say, unfortunately, our committee won't allow a crypto customer.
And that's because of regulators.
Correct, sir.
So you have had no concerns with KYC, AML. No banks don't bring that up to you. They just say they can't do business with crypto.
Sir, we're a fully SEC regulated company, audited financials. They don't raise any issues like that.
So the regulators are the ones who are leaving you where you are right now.
We believe so.
Thank you. And Mr. Campbell, you're familiar with KYC and AML requirements, correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you describe some of the issues that are considered when institutions are working through these requirements?
Yes, you're looking at the legal identity of the customers, the validity of their business activity, the source of funds, the expected activities over time, what you might think of as deviations from that, compliance with law, and so on. So if I was sitting at a bank and evaluating, say, Coinbase, I would be looking at things like, are they licensed? What is their staffing? What is their policies? Where do they get their money? You're doing a comprehensive analysis of the behavior of a client.
It's a very deep dive, and you feel comfortable after doing it.
Hopefully
you'd
you
want
do.
to, at least.
Yeah. Well, look, and when you don't, usually you should have found something particular, like, oh, this owner is on an OFAC sanctions list, or, oh, they appear to be laundering money for XYZ reasons. It's not really supposed to be about, for lack of a better word, vibes.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate all the witnesses with your answers here. It's just obvious that the regulators are it seems that they're the real reason that this is you're all here today testifying, and not the banks. And we have to get that under control. That's our job here at Congress. So I appreciate you all being here, and I appreciate the chairman for having this hearing, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Liccardo of California is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses for your statements. I appreciate my colleague Congresswoman Williams' frustration with the focus of the subcommittee on historic analysis of regulation, which I think I might agree with many of the assertions made that in some cases may have been overreach. In other cases, I don't think so. But regardless, this administration is no longer in office. I'd much rather focus on a forward-looking approach of what we can do to make things better. And I think debanking and access to banking services is a serious concern. And I hope that, Mr. Chairman, that all of us will agree that we need a strong Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to ensure that access to banking services is widely available, in addition to addressing concerns about banking regulators and its impact on debanking. We've got about 5.6 million low-income households that critically need access to banking services and aren't getting them. So I hope we can be more forward-looking going forward. On that note, I'd like to consider the larger questions that Mr. Campbell raised about banking regulation generally. I thought those were interesting, and I want to pose the question to Ms. Forgive me, Alishik. Thank you. Thank you for your patience with my pronunciation. I know you've raised obvious concerns about regulation of banks in the context of a digital asset that may have, for example, high volatility. Mr. Campbell recommends, though, as we're thinking about banking regulation generally, that regulators going forward approach regulation in a way that is, and I'm going to summarize here, not perfectly, but first, that the regulation be written, not oral, that be public, not secret, that be explanatory of a rationale used to reach the decision, and there be some, for lack of a better term, subject to appeal by a third entity. And I'm just curious about how your view of banking regulation, does that make sense as we think about how we can do better going forward?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. I actually agree with a lot of those suggestions. I think we need to start with the perspective that regulators must take a risk-based approach to this issue. And regardless of the industry, crypto or otherwise, regulators must look at what risk that's presenting to an individual bank or to the banking system in general, looking through the lens of financial stability. With regard to the solutions and a way forward, and I described this more in my written testimony, I have two main suggestions. First, clarity on rules and expectations for banks. I think that will set a level playing field for everyone involved. And secondly, more disclosure requirements for banks. I think this will help. It will help on the clarity, but it will also ensure that if someone, whether they're a crypto customer or a minority customer who's trying to get access to banking, they will understand why they're being told no.
Thank you. I want to go to Ms. Grewal for a moment. I understand the FTC has announced on Wednesday that withdraw its current guidance to banks on engaging in crypto-related activities. I know you've urged withdrawal of the OCC interpretive letter, I think it was 1179, which you found to be inconsistent with prior OCC letters. To what extent does the FDIC's action address your concerns? Do we still need to withdraw somehow or another, enact legislation that would force the withdrawal of that OCC?
Thank you, Congressman. I think the FDIC's announcement was a positive step, but I don't think it goes far enough. The fact of the matter is that in response to the Inspector General's report, the FDIC committed to conducting risk assessments of the crypto activities that the banks wish to engage in. And to date, we have no indication whatsoever that they did any assessment of the risk that they claim were so significant that they couldn't even allow the banks to participate in those activities at all. The other thing I would point out is that the FDIC, in response to our requests, abused the confidential supervisory information designation to redact page after page of materials in ways that were rejected by a federal court. That needs to be addressed. Finally, in response to an order from a federal district court to produce these pause letters that we were referencing, the FDIC misrepresented that its productions were complete. So I do think there's further work that needs to be done in order to restore public trust in the FDIC, but at a minimum, I do think that the announcement yesterday by the FDIC acting chair was a constructive one.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield.
Gentleman yields. Mr. Herdopoulos from Florida is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have trouble with that name too. No problem. Well, thank you very much for putting this together, Mr. Chairman. This has been very illuminating, especially as a first-year member of the committee, and it's very helpful to get us into the history of this, and it's been very helpful to get this going. And this is my first year in the Congress. We're trying to, I know the Congressman Moore and I, both new to the committee, are trying to kind of get under the hood and understand some of these things. As an outsider, we watched the FTX crisis happen, and we're kind of wondering, where was the oversight? And it was frustrating to see so many folks lose, in many cases, their life savings or significant savings, and the total disregard for their capital. One of the messages you'll hear from me consistently, not only today, but throughout the year, is certainty and stability. To me, that is not only important in business, but in life, especially as you try to teach that to your kids. And what is a little frustrating is I tried to do my homework on this. I watched the videos from years past before Mr. Gensler, for example, was actually in the job in the government. His videos showed he was actually positive about the industry, thought it would be something productive and creating, using the blockchain to make sure you had that certainty and understand what was happening. And yet in some of the first few days in this committee, we've learned not only that agency, but also the CFPB is doing everything they can to move capital out of our own country and going to places like the UAE and Singapore. I mean, America is the land of opportunity and where capital, I think, can strive best. With that said, I think I'll just ask Mr. Graywall, if you don't mind. I know these rapid fire questions. Let me give you a few minutes to walk me through what you went with. We all saw FTX and the lack of regulation. What did you all try to do in working with the regulators to say, we want to be regulated, we want to stabilize this industry? Walk me through this. You got a few minutes. I want to give you that opportunity, because too often I'm watching these early days in Congress, it's wing, bang, bang. I want to hear your kind of thoughtful, laid out answers so people can understand what good companies are trying to do versus some of those bad actors.
Thank you, Congressman. I referenced earlier the invitation by the prior SEC chair to come in and register. This was Mr. Gensler's constant refrain to cryptocurrency firms like mine that were interested in following the law, but looked at the law, could see no legal basis upon which to pursue registration. Registration is a very important element of any sound oversight and sound regulatory framework and structure for firms, not just in our industry, but frankly in any industry. Over and over again, when we met with the SEC, as I said, dozens and dozens of times, when we presented ideas for a way for intermediaries like Coinbase to register, a way for issuers of the tokens themselves to submit disclosures that would better inform consumers who purchase these tokens, what it is they were buying. When we shared ideas and concepts for ways in which the SEC could coordinate its activities over securities tokens and securities transactions with those of the CFTC, which has authority over non-securities and commodities in particular, we thought we had an opportunity. And yet, after these dozens and dozens of meetings, we were simply invited to stand up, step outside, and never come back. And a short while after that, Congressman, we were hit with a lawsuit. And for the last 2+ years, my company and I have been in federal district court fighting an enforcement case where there's no allegation of fraud, no allegation of abuse. And we have tried at every turn to simply get rules that we can follow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chairman yields. The chair now recognizes Mr. Moore of North Carolina for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to our witnesses, thank you for taking time to be here out of your schedules to bring this information before the committee. Just like Representative Herodopoulos, you're right, Mr. Chairman, it is a tough name. I had to practice it several times. This has been a new experience. I served in our state legislature in North Carolina, and so coming here and seeing things, it's been eye-opening in a lot of ways. But one of the more eye-opening things that I've seen since arriving here is how I've seen how some of our friends on the other side of the aisle will try to, I would describe it as weaponize the regulatory system to try to simply prevent access to types and forms of capital. And it strikes me, I did a little research here, and the country has roughly 334 million people in it. Most recent data shows of that, anywhere from 27 to 28% of the people in our country either own or use crypto. So based on my I was a solid C student in math. But based upon that, I think that's around 90 million people in this country who have confidence in crypto. And what it seems has been happening by the previous administration and by the other side is an attempt to try to use the regulatory framework to simply tell those 90 million people that they can't invest or they can't own in crypto. And I can't frankly think of anything that is more antithetical to a free enterprise system. So I first of all thanking those of you who are providing these opportunities for just ordinary consumers to be able to participate in a meaningful way in this new digital marketplace. I think it's digital currency is not only is the future, frankly, it is the present when nearly a third of the people in the country are actively using this. And has been, and I certainly don't want to repeat comments that have already been made so well by other members of the committee, but the regulatory framework of trying to add in the pressure to the banks to not engage with crypto, the pause letters, the opaque, I guess is the way to describe it, supervisory warning letters, and then of course the threats tied to the camels rating as well. And so, what we know about any kind of currency, any kind of thing is, if it's a legitimate matter, which I would say, or legitimate business, which this member certainly thinks that crypto is, then what's going to happen is if there's simply attempts to stifle it, it's going to go somewhere else where it is allowed, whether it's in industries, I believe, banking with state regulated banks, or many cases going offshore. So, Mr. Gruhl, I'll just ask this question to you. One, it does seem to me that as U.S. regulators are impacting the American digital asset community, it would appear, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that it is impacting our ability to compete globally. And if that is in fact the case, sir, are there any other countries that are more welcoming to that financial innovation?
Thank you, Congressman. There's no question that the sclerosis that we've all operated under here in the United States for the last many years, I will put it that way, regarding legislation regulation has led to a flight from the United States to other jurisdictions. The Europeans, for example, have passed a market in crypto assets form of legislation that, while not perfect, offers a reliable, steady framework within which to operate. That has drawn capital. That has drawn jobs. It was mentioned earlier, Singapore, another global leader in cryptocurrency regulation. They too are drawing capital, jobs, and frankly, enthusiasm and creativity that belongs here in the United States. While crypto is a global technology and a global industry, so much of the most important innovations actually were developed here in America. And yet, through this absence of regulation, this sclerosis, we've simply pushed entrepreneurs and risk takers, appropriate risk takers, the kinds of risk takers we used to be proud of in this country, to other parts of the world.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time. Chairman yields. The chair now recognizes Mr. Davidson of Ohio for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for allowing me to wave on to this subcommittee. I'm the chairman for National Security and Illicit Finance. Obviously been involved in digital assets and capital markets for a while, but normally wouldn't get to participate in this subcommittee. So thank you. It's a great hearing topic. Under the last Congress, I was on the Weaponization Committee, and we dealt with Operation Choke Point. Frankly, we looked at how banks were weaponizing the Bank Secrecy Act, really not of their own initiative, but under pressure from regulators and, frankly, the Department of Justice and even the FBI. So thanks for coming time. Look, the idea that we're referring to this as Choke Point 2.0 is pretty embarrassing because it means there was Choke Point 1.0, and that was under Obama, then under Biden. So we're noticing a theme. Hopefully we'll be clear because Congress will take action to make sure that we lock in this electoral mandate to reject the weaponized government that we've seen and make the most of this market. Just yesterday, having taken control of the FDIC from disastrous leadership, the Trump administration released 175 documents. Mr. Grewal, you highlighted a number of implications from some of those documents. But I just wanted to start with you and be clear that the targeting of the industry not only affected your company, but it affected Signature Bank. Barney Frank's portrait's right up there, and he was on the board of Signature Bank. He said there was no solvency issue. The problem was they're banking crypto. Did the improper seizure of Signature Bank scare the industry?
Yes, Congressman, the industry was not only scared, they were terrified, because that was a bank that was meeting its customer requirements, fulfilling every regulatory obligation, and simply because it chose to put its business into the hands of the crypto industry and its customers, it was effectively told to shut down.
Yeah, they were targeted and literally the assets seized. And look, it kind of reminds me, in a pasture, cows, not all of them have to hit the electric fence. They notice one of them hits the electric fence and everybody else kind of gets the memo. Stay clear. And it seems like that was the intent. Does anyone kind of disagree with that? Does that seem like that was the intent of that?
That was absolutely the intent.
Yeah, thank you. And look, you highlighted the collaboration that firms were doing with regulators. And, one of those, as the, Mr. Campbell, in addition, as the FDIC would demand letters of inquiry, they'd say, oh, give us a little more information, a little more information. Did they ever reach a point where they had learned enough about the business model and say, oh, well, now we understand you're green lighted to go ahead and participate. You're safe and sound. Did they ever do that?
No, as best we know, almost no bank was ever given approval for these actions.
And I think there's a coordinating committee. I don't know really where they met or what the nexus was. Elizabeth Warren kind of wants to take credit for it. Gary Gensler met with her often. Lael Brainerd from the FDIC, the Fed, kind of went into the administration. And they seem to be coordinated in the effort to shut down the industry. I think that if anything, you'll see a coordinated approach to kind of de-weaponize that and let the money be the money. And, the reality is we've seen for a long time, and look, some of my colleagues highlighted it by saying, oh, it's targeting, black or brown people or whatever. But the reality is, unfortunately, at times in our country's history, we've seen the financial services sector basically used as leverage to say, oh, well, you're not going to bank those people, are you? In this case, it really meant somebody with a business model. It didn't mean that it was sound or unsound. It just meant we don't like you. You're not going to bank those kind of people, are you? And that's exactly what the administration was doing to this entire sector. And sadly, we're seeing that happen in other sectors. In nearly every state in the country, some form of marijuana is legal, but you see, kind of a second tier of backdoor making it illegal by saying, oh, you're not going to bank those people, are you? So people, whether they're investors, employees, or anything else in a lawful sector are being debanked. Ms. Oleshnik, could you give us some insight into what we could do about that?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. So I think that we need to focus on, as I've said earlier, the risk analysis of the regulators need to ensure that there's a proper risk analysis being done of the risk that's being taken on, and every lawful business and customer and person is entitled to access to the banking system.
Yeah, we could pick up on that. We've done a lot. One of those bills was safe banking. Hopefully we'll get something like that along the finish line as a result of this focus on choke point. Thanks for the opportunity, and I yield back.
Chairman yields. Mr. Downey, Montana is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, as Montana's former regulator for securities and insurance, my mission was to hold bad actors accountable, to lower insurance costs, to reduce unnecessary regulations for Montana businesses. Tried to partner with business, try to streamline that while making sure that we do hold those bad actors accountable. My job was not to tell businesses who they can work with. The priority of the regulators is safety and soundness. And under Joe Biden, the priority was picking winners and losers, pushing policies that could not get enacted through Congress, from suffocating fossil fuel companies to stifling digital asset innovation in the United States. So my first question, Mr. Graywall, can you tell me what you expect regulators to do to protect the safety and soundness of the digital asset ecosystem?
Thank you, Congressman. I suppose to put it as simply as I can, to say what they want us to do, and when we do it, to say what else we need to do in order to comply with their expectations. It's the combination of refusing to lay out simple rules that we can all follow, and when they have questions with compliance with those rules, operating under the cloak of secrecy and using tactics such as delay and obfuscation to essentially exhaust the firm into submission.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, do regulators treat digital asset companies differently from other lines of business?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Mr. Teal, do you believe the Choke Point 2.0 scheme drives companies like yours out of the United States?
Congressman, 2 years ago, we made the public statement that we were going to move 50% of our revenues offshore because of the regulatory environment we were operating in. We grow at a very fast rate. We tripled our size in 2023. We doubled it again last year, and will likely grow at a very large rate this year. We make investments, if you look at last year alone, of $2 billion in the United States. That $2 billion results in $10 billion of GDP growth, jobs that are created, people that get schools paid for. In communities in Texas, our property taxes alone fund the fire department, the police department, and all sorts of public services. The fact that we have to look to go offshore for that, which increases our cost of doing business, is the only way we can survive as a business when the regulatory environment is antagonistic to our business.
Thank you. I'm proud to represent Montana's 2nd District. It's a very rural and sparsely populated. So, Mr. Teal, when companies are forced to shut down or exit due to unreasonable and political regulations, what's the future of innovation in states like Montana?
Well, unfortunately, Congressman, innovation ceases to exist in those states when technology companies like ourselves move out of the state. One of the downstream benefits for companies like us to come into states, especially rural states like Montana, is we have to train technicians. We hire technicians, we upskill them. We hire a lot of veterans, and we're a very proud employer of many veterans. We upskill them so that they're able to service the technology products that we put in the field. They're able to operate them, install them, manage them, monitor them. And if we pull up stakes and go, there aren't other jobs for them in those regions.
Thank you. The United States, must maintain its position as the hotbed for innovation, around the world. And access to banking services is crucial for fostering growth and opportunity. If you take issue with an industry, you can always pass a law rather than allow unelected bureaucrats to foreclose on their ability to do business. So thank you, Chairman, for holding this hearing. I'm happy there is a new administration and Congress who value fostering innovation in the United States. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The chair now recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Green, for 5 minutes of Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Permit me to ask, have any of you read some document from the Biden administration or some regulator indicating that there is an Operation 2.0 checkpoint or Operation Choke Point 2.0? Have you, from the Biden administration, that said 2.0? Okay, so this is a made-up statement. Somebody concluded that this is something that sells, so they've gone with 2.0. I was here in 2008 when we had the downturn, and it was never alleged that too much regulation caused the problem. I was here when Bernie Madoff made off with more than $60 billion. It was never alleged that too much regulation is what allowed him to do it. Silver Bank, Signature Bank. In fact, my colleagues have indicated that it was the regulators that caused the problem. A lack of regulation. Not all, but some have. So the question becomes this: do you want too much regulation, too little regulation, or you want it to be the Goldilocks, just right? Wouldn't we all? But the point is, given what's happening without guardrails as it relates to cryptocurrency, and I believe that, would you agree that we need some more guardrails? Anybody agree? Okay, if you agree, raise your hand. Just raise your hand, please. Okay, everybody agrees. Well, where do the guardrails come from? Somebody might say Congress. Would you agree that Congress is the place where guardrails should emanate? Raise your hands, please. This is okay. Thank you. For Congress to act, you have to have an act of Congress. Congress hasn't been able to act for various and sundry reasons. I don't want to get into all of it, but the regulators are in a tough position. I wouldn't want to be a regulator. It's a tough job, because if a bank fails, then you didn't do enough. And then if it somehow doesn't give you the kind of regulation that you want, it's too much. I wouldn't want to be a regulator. But I do know this. I was here to receive all of the complaints in 2008 and all of the complaints in the 60s, I think it was, when Bernie Madoff performed his dastardly deed. A good many people who want less regulation won't be here to receive the complaints. They come and they go. But there are some of us who have decided that we want to be here today and tomorrow and thereafter. And we've been fortunate enough and blessed enough to do it. So I'm not going to get angry with regulators because those who are regulated contend that they're overregulated. I want to fix a problem, but I'm not going to take all of this and conclude that the regulators are overregulating, when you all agree that there should be guardrails. At some point, Congress has to act. I've seen Chairman Waters when she was chair and as ranking member. She and Mr. McHenry worked to try to give us the guardrails. But it's difficult to satisfy enough members to get something done. If these banks fail and you have a cascading event, we will find ourselves revisiting 2008. When Silvergate and Signature Bank, when they went under, one of our great fears was that this could become the start of a domino effect. And I remember how hard our ranking member worked with others to try to prevent this. So I thank you for your testimony. And I assure you, I'm going to do what I can to make sure that you're being treated fairly. But if I'm going to err, it will be on the side of regulating and not deregulating. I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Stile, is now recognized for 5 minutes, the chair of Subcommittee on Digital Assets.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate all of you being here today. As chairman of the committee, on the subcommittee on digital assets, I take great interest to this and appreciate you, Mr. Chairman, for waving me on to the committee today on what has been an incredibly important conversation. My colleague across the aisle, in his closing remarks for the minority, referenced that Choke Point 2.0 might be a made-up statement. But I feel like that is as if you open the door of your home, the sidewalk and driveway is wet, and you conclude, aha, but I didn't see the rain. It's pretty obvious what's going on when you actually look behind the hood and use common sense, just like you would if you open your door and you look out and your driveway is wet. Common sense tells you that it rained. If we look at what played out in the Biden administration through the regulators and what played out through their pause letters, which we've discussed today, through informal or offline means, it was pressure of financial institutions to debank digital asset firms and to make sure that those individuals understood that that pressure was there across the ecosystem. I think that's what we really see today at today's committee hearing. And it's the importance of not allowing, as we discovered in choke point 1.0 with our Second Amendment rights, not allowing the regulators to drive forward a political agenda through their authority as regulators to correctly assess risk across the system, but not to put their finger on the scale as it results in their individual view of any given industry that the bank or financial system should be lending into. So I think with that is kind of a stage setting. What I want to do is dig in briefly, if I can. I'll start with you, Mr. Campa, and I'll move along. I think one of the important parts here to discuss is kind of how bank examiners define traditional risk and how it's different from reputational risk. And succinctly, can you give me the difference between those? Because I want to build on that.
Yes, reputational risk is essentially, we believe a bank is doing something that could damage its reputation in some ways that would cause customers to disfavor it, versus forms of business risk that are more objective, like you're lending to very risky people.
And so would reputational risk, could that be used as a shield for regulators to inject political objectives into the banking system?
It certainly could be, yes.
And do you think that that was the case as it relates to crypto investments?
Well, I mean, there's a great example of that. Paxos ran BUSD in New York. They've been regulating stablecoins since 2018, and thanks to regulatory pressure, that had to be shut down. Like, I have the privilege of having built one of two stablecoins that was above 10 billion and went back to zero. We disrupted no markets, returned every penny. There was no danger to everybody, and shutting it down benefited Tether.
Let me jump to you, Mr. Graywell, if I can, to build on this. In your experience, how do regulators and banks think about reputational risk, and to what extent does the political bias or policy bias of the regulators, how are they leveraging those two risks to drive their agenda?
Well, reputation in banking matters, Congressman. There's no question about it, but it too often is used as a catch-all or an excuse for other considerations that have no basis in law, or frankly, no basis in fairness. There's no question that additional guidance from this Congress would be extraordinarily helpful in cabining and restricting the use of reputational risk to simply deem unacceptable all sorts of industries or individuals who happen to be out of political favor.
Yeah, and I think broadly speaking, as we wrap up today's hearing, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for scheduling it, this is a broader point that politics don't belong in our banking laws. And what we want is the regulators on their task to analyze actual risk in the system, rather than putting their finger on the scale to drive forward their own partisan, political, or social agenda. And so having today's hearing on choke point 2.0 in a recognition that this really was occurring by the regulators inside the Biden administration, I think is important. I think it's a bit naive or attempting to discredit the facts when to say that that it's not occurring. And again, I go back to my analogy. If you open the door of your home and the pavement's wet and your driveway is wet, it rained. And as we look back as to what happened inside our financial system under the Biden administration, we could have a debate of whether or not you feel like you need more evidence, but I think the evidence is pretty clear. It rained. And we need to stop this, and we have a real opportunity. One final point, it was referenced that legislation didn't get done in the previous Congress under the Biden administration. The good news is we have Republican unified control, and I think we got a great opportunity for Congress to act. Look forward to working with everybody. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Before we adjourn, I'm going to take a point of personal privilege and yield to the ranking member.
Thank you again for your kindness, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, sadly today, and to a certain extent, happily, we have one among us who is going on to bigger and better things. She has been an outstanding public servant, a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant asset to the committee in that she has worked with us. Many of the things that we have been able to do successfully, we can contribute to or attribute to her and her brilliance. So today, Esther Kong is going to be leaving us shortly. This is her last hearing. And I would hope that we respect her and appreciate her enough to give her a round of applause. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield back.
Chairman yields. Well, we'd certainly like to thank our witnesses for their testimony today. I think it's clear we need the FDIC to provide clear guidance and regulatory responsibility for the digital asset industry. Congress and this committee will create a framework for digital assets regulation, but prudential regulators must immediately allow the crypto industry access to financial services. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit additional written questions for the witnesses to the chair. Questions will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. I ask our witnesses to please respond no later than March 31st, 2025. This hearing is adjourned. Thank you all.
There you have it, guys. Told you it was a pretty good one. It was the juicy one. Oh, those Dems. All right, guys, we've been going for 2 hours. I will be live over on the Patreon in about a half hour. So bear with me with that. We will do our live stream over there. If you want to join us, we will be talking about the gems that we've been picking out, guys. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about a whole bunch of stuff, guys. So get on over there. I'll see you guys on the Patreon in about a half hour for the live. Get in where you fit in. Don't miss out. And I'll see you guys in about a half hour. Peace.